In Dry Creek, the gallows never needed ropes. Our judge had his daughter, and the sentence he nailed to the courthouse wall at sunrise carried more sting than any hangman's knot, promising spectacle, ruin, and perhaps a salvation no one yet imagined. By noon, every boot scuff and bonnet tilled in town turned toward the paper flapping like a white flag of shame. Judge Elijah Crowley, stiff-backed and cruelly certain of his own righteousness, declared that his only child, Evelyn Crowley, aged 20, would marry the first unmarried man bold enough to claim her within the week. A punishment, not a proposal. A trial for pride, because Evelyn had turned down Matthew Hale, the richest rancher in 2 counties, and Elijah aimed to break her spirit before it broke his reputation. The town treated it like theater. Men smirked over their whiskey, women whispered over washtubs, children stared wide-eyed at Evelyn when she dared walk down the dusty street with her chin held level. She was a proud figure, slender, dark-haired, carrying books others had never learned to read, her gloves worn thin but hiding hands that trembled when no one was watching. She was no meek daughter, and that rankled the judge more than the desert wind that stung his eyes raw. In the shadows of the livery, Daniel Boone kept quiet. He was 24, a stable hand whose parents had been swallowed by fever years back. His boots were scuffed, his shirt frayed, his green eyes steady as still water. Folks barely noticed him, save for when their horses needed tending. He had no land, no ambition to own saloons or sway politics, no coin to speak of, but he had patience, and patience often grows heavier roots than money. As the days ticked down, Dry Creek grew restless. Every sundown, wagers clinked across tables. Would it be a drunk, a widower, a desperate farmhand? By the 6th night, Matthew Hale swaggered through town certain Evelyn would surrender once she felt the tick of shame press against her skin. Evelyn, however, sat at her room by a sputtering candle, staring at the walls that never felt like home, whispering words to herself not of prayer, but of defiance. I will not kneel to wealth. The 7th day dawned cold, sky washed pale as old parchment. The church bell tolled, and the pews filled with half the county, faces gleaming with hunger for scandal. Evelyn stood at the altar, her jaw tight enough to crack, waiting to see what cruel fate would arrive. And then, there he was, Daniel Boone. Not Hale with his fine boots, not some drunkard lured by a purse, but a quiet man in worn clothes who stepped forward with no bravado, only a calm steadiness that hushed the murmurs for half a breath. When the vows came, Evelyn's voice did not falter. She said, I do. Daniel, instead of pressing his lips to hers, bent and kissed her hand with such reverence it startled the room more than a gunshot. Gasps rippled, laughter barked, the judge's face went rigid as cracked leather. He thrust a small purse into Daniel's palm, spat at the floorboards, and declared, She is your charge now. That spit rang louder than the bell itself. Evelyn did not look back when Daniel led her away. The sentence had been carried out, but no one in Dry Creek yet understood whose punishment had truly begun. Daniel's cabin sat a mile outside town, weatherboards leaning but still upright, smelling of smoke and cedar. He carried her suitcase inside, placed it gently by the bed, and spoke in a voice rough with dust but clear as honesty. I will not take what is not freely given. That promise struck Evelyn harder than any command. The world had taught her men took. Daniel offered silence, distance, respect. It unsettled her, and slowly it soothed her. The weeks unfolded like unmarked pages. Daniel struggled with the letters in his Bible, eyes narrowing at the jumble. Evelyn, seizing purpose, began to teach him. Candlelight evenings turned into lessons where her voice grew softer, his eyes sharper. In turn, Daniel taught her the land, the way hawks wheeled before a storm, how the hush of birds meant snow, how prairie firewood burned best after stubborn waiting. The cabin filled not with romance spoken, but with gestures, bread left warming by the hearth, a blanket tucked without comment, a glance held a heartbeat too long. Yet Dry Creek did not forgive. At the well, whispers sharpened. Crowley's girl boils beans for a stable hand. At the saloon, men laughed that Daniel's child would be born before spring, though her figure stayed slim. Judge Crowley, gnawed by humiliation, sent word through a lawyer. Annulment could be arranged if she only bent back to his will. Evelyn's hand shook as she wrote the reply, but the words steadied her soul. I choose to stay. That choice marked the midpoint of her trial. Together, she and Daniel began inviting neighbor children to the cabin. Chalk scratched across slates as small hands traced letters. Daniel stood guard at the door, nodding approval like a sentinel, while Evelyn's voice carried the rhythm of lessons. Bread was broken with those who hungered, though they had little to spare. Slowly, suspicion bent into curiosity, then into quiet respect. The cabin became more than home. It became Dry Creek's first humble schoolhouse. But shadows lengthened. Judge Crowley whispered poison into Hale's ear. Boone could not support her. The schoolhouse mocked scripture. Their marriage was folly. Gossip returned sharper, knives honed in the dark. One night, Evelyn lingered at the general store and overheard women cackling that she was nothing more than a fallen daughter chained to a fool. Their words pierced deeper than any blade. That night, she packed a suitcase. Daniel woke to the scrape of the latch. He asked no questions, only, "Do you not trust me, Choose?" Her mask cracked. Tears came hot, shaming her cheeks. She confessed her fear, that their bond was forged not by love but exile, that he deserved more than a woman cursed by her father's wrath. Daniel did not argue, did not plead. He knelt, took her hand again as on their wedding day, and whispered, "Stay or go. But know this, I will not unchoose you." That was their lowest point. The night despair almost pulled her back into her father's snare. But Evelyn stayed, because choice once spoken takes root. Seasons shifted. The schoolhouse grew. Daniel, once silent, began reading aloud from the Bible she'd taught him, his voice uneven but proud. Neighbors brought bread and honey, traded lessons for favors. The judge's threats sounded thinner with each passing month. And then, in autumn's crisp dawn, Evelyn bore a son, Samuel Boone, red-faced and bawling, a living testament that from punishment had sprung life itself. The cabin door opened that week to townsfolk carrying blankets, stew, whispered apologies. The same people who once sneered now bent their heads, admitting without words that dignity breeds respect stronger than fear. Crowley passed by once, eyes cold as frost, lips stiff, but his silence no longer mattered. Evelyn no longer bowed. Daniel no longer hid his rough hands. Together, they had turned exile into sanctuary, shame into learning, punishment into promise. Years later, when dusk settled and coyotes sang, the cabin's window glowed with lamplight. Children still gathered, their voices spelling out letters, while Samuel gurgled on his mother's lap and Daniel read with halting pride. To strangers, it might look ordinary, a poor cabin lit against the prairie night. But for those who knew, it was a monument to stubborn love, mule-strong patience, and the quiet rebellion of choosing dignity over fear. And so the tale lingers, not just in Dry Creek, but in the telling. The judge who thought he was breaking a daughter, the rancher who thought he was owed a bride, the town that thought it knew shame when all it learned was grace. Remember this, rider passing through. The harshest winter cannot freeze a heart that chooses love. Remember this, wanderer seeking your own road. Punishment can be a gift if you choose to make it so.